Hello, guys and gals, and this is part 18 of our reading of William Goldman's The Princess Bride, a hot fairy tale, and we're going to go over the copyright information, which is, okay, find the right page, here it is. Copyright 1973 by William Goldman, all rights reserved, and published in the United States by Ballantine Books, a division of Random House Incorporated, New York, and simultaneously in Canada by Ballantine Books of Canada Limited, Toronto, Canada. Library of Congress number is there, the ISBN is there. The edition, it says, yeah, okay. And this is all the information. And the cover art is by Norman Green. Now, in the last part, the prince and count were torturing Wesley, and the princess can't stop talking about Wesley, and it's making Humperdinck really mad. But anyways, we're going to continue, I guess. Let's see. Maddening. So each night, the count's discomfort, which made Wesley writhe and twist, were really sort of all right. The prince would manage an hour or so of spectating before he and the count would leave, the count still oddly silent, and down below, tending the wounds, the albino would whisper, "Tell them, please. They will only add to your suffering." Wesley could hardly suppress a smile. He had felt no pain, not once, none. He had closed his eyes and taken his brain away. That was the secret. If he could take his brain away from the present and send it to where it could contemplate skin like wintry cream, well, let them enjoy themselves. His revenge time would come. Wesley was living now most of all for Buttercup, but there was no denying that there was no more thing he wanted to. There was one more thing he wanted to. His time. Prince Humperdinck simply had no time. There seemed to be not one decision. All Florin, that one way or another, didn't eventually come heavily to rest upon his shoulders. Not only was he getting married, his country was having its 500th anniversary. Not only was he noodling around in his mind the best way to get a war going, he also had to constantly have affection shining from his eyes. Every detail had to be met, and met correctly. His father was just no help at all, refusing either to expire or stop mumbling. "Yes, thought your father was dead, but that was in..." He thought his father was dead, but that was on the fake out. Don't forget. Morgenstern was just edging into the nightmare sequence, so don't be confused. And start making sense. Queen Bella simply hovered around him, translating here and there, and it was with a shock that Prince Humperdinck realized just 12 days before his wedding day that he had neglected to set in motion the crucial Gilder section of his plan. So he called Yellen to the castle late one night. Yellen was chief of all enforcement of Florin City, a job he had inherited from his father. The albino keeper at the zoo was Yellen's first cousin, and together they formed the only pair of non-nobles the prince could come close to trusting. "Your Highness," Yellen said. He was small, but crafty, with darting eyes and slippery hands. Prince Humperdinck came out from behind the desk. He moved close to Yellen and looked carefully around before saying softly, "I have heard from unimpeachable sources that many men from Gilder have of late begun to infiltrate our thieves' quarters. They are disguised as Florinese, and I'm worried." "I have heard nothing of such a thing," Yellen said. "A prince has spies everywhere." "I understand," said Yellen. "And you think since the evidence points that they tried to kidnap your fiancée once, such a thing might happen again?" It is a possibility." "I'll close off the thieves' quarters then," Yellen said. "No one will enter and no one will leave." "Not good enough," said the prince. "I want the thieves' quarters emptied and every villain jailed until I am safely on my honeymoon." Yellen did not nod quickly enough for the prince said, "State your problem." "My men are not always too happy at the thought of entering the thieves' quarters. Many of the thieves resist change. Root them out. Form a brute squad, but get it done. It takes at least a week to get a decent brute squad going, Yellen said, but that is time enough. He bowed and started to leave, and that was when the scream began. Yellen had heard many things in his life, but nothing quite so eerie as this. He was a brave man, but this sound frightened him. It was not human. He could not guess the throat of the beast it came from. It was actually a wild dog in the first level of the zoo, but no wild dog had ever shrieked like that before. But then no wild dog had ever been put in the machine. The sound grew in anguish, and it filled the night sky as it spread across the castle grounds, over the walls, even into the great square beyond. It would not stop. It simply hung now below the sky, an audible reminder of the existence of agony in the great square. Half a dozen children screamed back at the night, trying to blot out the sound. Some wept, and some only ran for home. Then it began to lessen in volume. Now it was hard to hear in the great square. Now it was gone. Now it was hard to hear on the castle walls. Now it was gone. From the castle walls, it shrunk across the grounds toward the first level of the zoo of death, where Count Rugen sat fiddling with some knobs. The wild dog died. Count Rugen rose, and it was all he could do to bury his own shriek of triumph. He left the zoo and ran towards Prince Humperdinck's chambers. Yellen was just going when the count got there. The prince was seated now behind the desk. When Yellen was gone and they were alone, the count bowed to his majesty. The machine, he said, at last works. Prince Humperdinck took a while before answering. It was a ticklish situation. Granted, he was the boss. The count merely an underling. Still, no one in all Florin had Rugen's skills. As an inventor, he had obviously at last rid the machine of all defects. As an architect, he had been crucial in the safety factors involved in the zoo of death, and it had undeniably been Rugen who had arranged for the only survivable entrance being the underground fifth level one. He was also supportive to the prince in all endeavors of hunting and battle, and you did not give a follower like that a quick "get away, boy. You bother me." So the prince indeed took a while. "Look, Ty," he said finally, "I'm just thrilled you smoothed all the bugs out of the machine. I never for a minute doubted you'd get it right eventually, and I'm really anxious as can be to see it working. But how can I put this? I can't keep my head above water 1 minute to the next. It's not just the parties and the goo-gooing with what's-her-name. I've got to decide how long the 500th anniversary parade is going to be, and where does it start, and when does it start, and which nobleman gets to march in front of which other nobleman, so that everyone's still speaking to me at the end of it. Plus, I've got a wife to murder and a country to frame for it. Plus, I've got to get the war going once that's all happened, and all this is stuff I've got to do myself. Here's what it all comes down to. I'm just swamped, Ty. So how about if you go work on Wesley and tell me how it goes, and when I get the time, I'll come watch, and I'm sure it'll be just wonderful. But for now, what I'd like is a little breathing room. No hard feelings." Count Rugen smiled. "None." And there wasn't any. He always felt better when he could dole out pain alone. You could concentrate much more deeply when you were alone with agony. I know you'd understand, Ty." There was a knock on the door, and Buttercup stuck her head in. "Any news?" she said. The prince smiled at her and sadly shook his head. "Honey, I promised to tell you the second I hear a thing. It's only 12 days, though. Plenty of time, Dulcet, darling. Now, don't worry yourself. I'll leave you," Buttercup said. I was going to," the count said. "May I walk you to your quarters?" Buttercup nodded, and down the corridor they went. They wandered till they reached her suite. "Good night," Buttercup said quickly. Ever since that day he had first come to her father's farm, she had always been afraid whenever the count was near. I'm sure he'll come, the count said, rather. He was privy to all the prince's plans, and Buttercup was well aware of that. I don't know your fellow well, but he impressed me greatly. Any man who can find his way through the fire swamp can find his way to Florin Castle before your wedding day. Buttercup nodded. He seemed so strong, so remarkably powerful, the count went on, his voice warmed and lulling. I only wonder if he possesses true sensitivity as some men of great might. As you know, do you... Oh, let me reread this. He seemed so strong, so remarkably powerful, the count went on, his voice warmed and lulling. I only wondered if he possessed true sensitivity as some men of great might, as you know, do not. For example, I wonder if he is capable of tears. Wesley would never cry, Buttercup answered, opening her chamber door, except for the death of a loved one. And with that she closed the count away, and alone went to her bed and knelt. Wesley, she thought then, do come, please. I have begged you in my thoughts now these many weeks, and still no word. Back when we were on the farm, I thought I loved you, but that was not love. When I saw your face behind the mask on the ravine floor, I thought I loved you, but that was again nothing more than deep infatuation, beloved. I think I love you now, and I pray you only give me the chance to spend my life in constant proving. I could spend my life in the fire swamp and sing from morn till night if you were by me. I could spend eternity sinking down through snow sand if my hand held your hand. My preference would be to last eternity with you beside me on a cloud, but hell would also be a lark if Wesley was with me. She went on with that silent hour after silent hour. She had done nothing else for 38 evenings now, and each time her ardor deepened, her thoughts became more pure. Wesley, Wesley, flying across the seven seas to claim her. For his part, and not quite without knowing, Wesley was spending his evening in much the same fashion after the torture was done. When the albino had finished tending his slashes or burns or breaks, when he was alone in the giant cage, he sent his brain to Buttercup, and there it dwelled. He understood her so well in his mind. He realized that moment he left her on the farm when she swore love. Certainly she meant it, and she was barely 18. What did she know of the depth of the heart? Then again, when he had removed his black mask and she had tumbled to him, surprise had been operating stunned astonishment as much as emotion. But just as he knew that the sun was obliged to rise each morning in the east, no matter how much a western arisal might have pleased it, so he knew that Buttercup was obliged to spend her love on him. Gold was inviting, and so was royalty, but they could not match the fever in his heart, and sooner or later she would have to catch it. She had less choice than the sun. So when the count appeared with the machine, Wesley was not particularly perturbed. As a matter of fact, he had no idea what the count was bringing with him into the giant cage. As a matter of absolute fact, the count was bringing nothing. It was the albino who was doing the actual work, making trip after trip with thing after thing. That was what it really looked like to Wesley. Things, little soft-rimmed cups of various sizes, and a wheel, most likely, and another object that could turn out to be either a lever or a stick. It was hard to tell. A good evening to you, the count began. He had never, to Wesley's memory, shown such excitement. Wesley made a very weak nod in return. Actually, he felt about as well as ever, but it didn't do to let that kind of news get around. Feeling a bit under the weather, the count asked. Wesley made another feeble nod. The albino scurried in and out, bringing more things. Wire-like extensions, stringy and endless. That will be all, the count said finally. Nod. Gone. This is the machine, the count said when they were alone. I've spent 11 years constructing it. As you can tell, I'm rather excited and proud. Okay. Wesley managed an affirmative blink. I'll be putting it together for a while, and with that he got busy. Wesley watched the construction with a good deal of interest, and logically enough, curiosity. You heard that scream a bit earlier on this evening. Another affirmative blink. That was a wild dog. This machine caused the sound. It was a very complex job the Count was doing, but the 6 fingers on its right hand never for a moment seemed to doubt as to just what to do. I'm very interested in pain, the Count said, and I'm sure you've gathered these past months in an intellectual way. Actually, I've written a course for the more learned journals on the subject. Um, Articles mostly. At the present, I'm engaged in writing a book. My book, the book, I hope, the definitive works on pain, at least as we know it now. Wesley found the whole thing fascinating. He made a little groan. I think pain is the most underrated emotion available to us, the Count said. The serpent, to my interpretation, was pain. Pain has been with us always, and it always irritates me when people say as important as life and death, because the proper phrase to my mind should be as important as pain and death. The Count fell silent for a time, then, as he began and completed a series of complex adjustments. One of my theories, he said somewhat later, is that pain involves anticipation. Nothing original, I admit, but I'm going to demonstrate to you what I mean. I will not underline, not use the machine on you this evening. I could, it's ready and tested, but instead I will simply erect it and leave it beside you for you to stare at through the next 24 hours, wondering just what it is and how it works. And can it really be as dreadful as all that? He tightened some things here, loosened some more over there, tugged and patted and shaped. The machine looks so silly, Wesley was tempted to giggle. Instead, he groaned again. I'll leave you to your imagination then, the Count said, and he looked at Wesley. But I want you to know one thing before tomorrow night happens to you, and I mean it. You are the strongest, the most brilliant and brave, and the most altogether worthy creature I have ever been. It has ever been my privilege to meet, and I feel almost sad that for the purpose of my book and future plans and future pain scholars, I must destroy you. Thank you. Thank you, Wesley breathed softly. The Count went to the cage door and said over his shoulder, and you can stop all your performing about how weak and beaten you are. You haven't fooled me for a month. You're practically as strong now as on the day you entered the fire swamp. I know your secret, if it's any consolation to you. Secret? Hushed, strained. You've been taking your brain away, the Count cried. You haven't felt at least the least discomfort in all these months. You raise your eyes and drop your eyelids, and then you're off, probably with, I don't know, her, most likely. Good night now. Try to sleep. I doubt you'll be able to anticipation, remember? With a wave of his with a wave he mounted the underground stairs. Wesley could feel the sudden pressure on his heart. Soon the albino came, knelt by Wesley's ear, whispering, I've been watching you all those days. You deserve better than what's coming. I'm needed. No one else feels the... Okay, wait. Sorry, let me reread this. Wesley could feel a sudden pressure on his heart. Soon the albino came, knelt by Wesley's ear, whispering, I've been watching you all these days. You deserve better than what's coming. I'm needed. No one else feeds the beast as I do. I'm safe. They won't hurt me. I'll kill you if you'd like. That would foil them. I've got some good poison. I beg you. I've seen the machine. I was there when the wild dog screamed. Please, let me kill you. You'll thank me, I swear. I must live, whispered, but interruption. They will not reach me. I am all right. I am fine. I am alive, and I will stay that way, he said. The words loud, and he said them with passion. But for the first time in a long time, there was terror. Well, could you sleep? The Count asked the next night upon his arrival in the cage. Quite honestly, no, Wesley replied in a normal voice. I'm glad you're being honest with me. I'll be honest with you. No more charades between us, the Count said, putting down a number of notebooks and quill pens and ink bottles. I must carefully track your reactions, he explained. In the name of science? The Count nodded. If my experiments are valid, my name will last beyond my body. It's immortality I'm after. To be quite honest, he adjusted a few knobs on the machine. I suppose you're naturally curious as to how it works. I have spent the night pondering, and I know no more than when I started. It appears to be a great conglomeration of soft-rimmed cups of infinitely varying sizes, together with a wheel and a dial and a lever, and what it does is beyond me. And also glue, added the Count, pointing to a small tub of thick stuff to keep the cups attached. And with that, he set to work, taking cup after cup, touching the soft rims with glue and setting them against Wesley's skin. Eventually, I'll have to put one on your tongue, too, the Count said, but I'll save that for last, in case you have any questions. This certainly isn't the easiest thing to set up, is it? I'll be able to fix that in later models, the Count said. At least those are my present plans, and he kept right on putting cup after cup on Wesley's skin until every inch of exposed surface was covered. So much for the outside, the Count said. Then the next one is a bit more delicate. Try not to move. I'm chained hand, head, and foot, Wesley said. How much movement do you think I'm capable of? Are you really as brave as you sound, or are you a little frightened? The truth, please. This is for posterity, remember? I'm a little frightened, Wesley said. The Count jotted that down, along with the time. Then he got down to the fine work, and soon there were tiny, soft-rimmed cups on the inside of Wesley's nostrils, against his eardrums, under his eyelids, above and below his tongue, and before the Count arose, Wesley was covered inside and out with the things. Now, all I do, the Count said very loudly, hoping Wesley could hear, is get the wheel going to its fastest spin so that I have more than enough power to operate, and the dial can be set for 1 to 20, and this being the first time, I will set it to the lowest setting, which is 1, and then all I need to do is push the lever forward, and we should, if I haven't gummed it up, be in full operation. But Wesley, as the lever moved, took his brain away, and when the machine began, Wesley was stroking her autumn-colored hair and touching her skin of wintry cream, and then the world exploded, because the cups were everywhere, and before they had punished his body, but left his brain only, not the machine. The machine reached everywhere. His eyes were not his to control. His ears could not hear her gentle, loving whisper, and his brain slid far from love into the deep vault of despair, hit hard, fell again, down through the house of agony into the country of pain. Inside and out, Wesley's world was ripped apart, and he could do nothing more but crack along with it. The Count turned off the machine then, and he picked up the notebooks and said, as you no doubt know, the concept of the suction pump is centuries old. Well, basically, that's all this is, except instead of water, I'm sucking life. I just sucked away 1 year of your life. Later, I'll set the dial higher, certainly to 2 or 3, perhaps even to 5. Theoretically, 5 should be 5 times more severe and what you've just endured. So please be more specific with your answers. Tell me now honestly, how do you feel? In humiliation and suffering and frustration and anger and anguish so great it was dizzying, Wesley cried like a baby. Interesting, said the Count, and carefully noted it down. It took Yellen a week to get the enforcers together in sufficient numbers, together with an adequate brute squad, and so 5 days before the wedding, he stood at the head of the company awaiting the speech of the prince. This was in the castle courtyard, and when the prince appeared, the count was as usual with him. Although not as usual, the count seemed preoccupied, which, of course, he was. Though Yellen had no way of knowing that, the count had sucked 10 years from Wesley this past week, and with the life of 60 and with the life of 65 that was average for a Florinese male, the victim had approximately 30 years remaining, assuming he was about 25 when they started experimenting. But how best to go about dividing that? The count was simply in a quandary. So many possibilities, but which would prove scientifically most interesting? The count sighed. Life was not easy. You are here, the prince began, because there may be another plot against my beloved. I charge each and every one of you with being her personal protector. I want the thieves' quarter emptied and all the inhabitants jailed 24 hours before my wedding. Only then will I rest easy. Gentlemen, I beg you, think of this mission as being an affair of the heart, and I know you will not fail. With that, he pivoted and followed by the count, hurried from the courtyard, leaving Yellen in command. We're going to have to leave this here. We have been reading from William Goldman's The Princess Bride. If you like this content, then make sure you like and subscribe and ring the bell so you know when I upload. Also, want to support me in any way, all the information will be in the description below, along with a link to the Discord server. Thanks for watching, everyone, and have a great day.